For 33 years, Merritt Hale believed loyalty meant never stepping away from the mission. Then Vesper, the aging canine who had followed him through every season of service, began missing commands. During one winter exercise, the old German shepherd still led Merritt to a lost woman and a freezing puppy, but saving them forced Merritt to face a truth no training had prepared him to accept. Vesper had not lost his worth. He had only reached the moment when love should ask less of him. This is a story about retirement, quiet courage, and learning that an ordinary life can still have meaning. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. Methow Valley looked harmless beneath winter light. Fresh snow lay across the eastern slopes in broad, clean sheets, bright enough to make the eyes ache. Pines stood motionless beneath a pale blue sky. The air was so cold that every breath appeared briefly in front of a person, then disappeared before it could become anything permanent. Senior Chief Merritt Hale preferred weather like this. Cold made people honest. It exposed loose gloves, poor planning, weak batteries, and bad judgment without wasting time on politeness. A person either respected it or eventually learned why they should have. At 56, Merritt still moved with the controlled economy of a man accustomed to carrying more than he mentioned. He stood 6 feet tall, perhaps a little over, with broad shoulders beneath an olive-drab combat shirt. Camouflage sleeves covered his arms, dark horizontal bands stitched around the upper sections. His brown-gray hair had been pushed back by the wind, revealing the silver at both temples. A short layer of stubble softened the long angles of his face without making him look less severe. Vesper moved beside him through the snow. The 10-year-old German shepherd carried his age with more dignity than Merritt did. Black fur spread unevenly across his back, heavier near the left shoulder, while deep, honey-colored hair covered his chest and neck. Silver had gathered around his muzzle. His left ear stood straight, the right tilted slightly outward from an old cartilage injury. He wore a fitted olive canine harness, though the morning exercise required little more than orientation work and hand signal response. That was how Merritt had described it. A light evaluation, nothing demanding, nothing Vesper had not done 100 times before. 20 minutes, Dana Mercer said. She stood beside the marked training lane with a waterproof field notebook tucked beneath one arm. At 51, Dana was lean, square-faced, and direct in a way that made unnecessary words feel embarrassed to exist. Her ash-blonde hair was cut short beneath a black knit cap. A radio sat high on the shoulder of her coyote brown jacket. 20 minutes, Merritt repeated, and if he slows, loses focus, favors the rear leg, or misses a cue, you stop. I know how to read my dog. Dana's pale eyes rested on him for 1 second longer than comfort required. I know you know, she said. That isn't the same as knowing you'll listen. Merritt adjusted Vesper's lead. The small brass compass beneath his collar pressed briefly against his chest. He touched its worn rim through the fabric, a habit so old he rarely noticed doing it. Ready? He asked. Vesper looked up. The answer was not enthusiasm. Vesper had never wasted energy performing excitement for human approval. His amber eyes simply settled on Merritt's face, waiting. Merritt gave the forward signal. They entered the trees. The training route had been laid along a shallow ridge where snow remained firm beneath the boots. Colored markers had been attached to trunks at intervals, and the exercise required Vesper to respond to directional cues while ignoring controlled distractions placed farther down the slope. The first sequence went cleanly. Left turn, stop, hold, forward. Vesper moved with the remembered precision of long practice. His pace was slower than it had been 3 winters earlier, but there was no confusion in him. Merritt felt the familiar certainty settle through his body. There. That was the truth. Not the assessment forms, not the careful language about reduced endurance and age-related change, not the way Naomi Bell had removed her glasses before telling him they needed to discuss retirement. Vesper was still Vesper. At the second marker, Merritt shifted to the dog's right side. Down. Vesper continued one step, only one, then he stopped and lowered himself into the snow. The pause was small enough that no one behind them should have noticed. Merritt lifted 2 fingers and repeated the command as a hand signal. Vesper responded at once. Wind through the trees, Merritt told himself. Sound bounced strangely over snow. He glanced back. Dana stood farther along the route, speaking with a member of the county search team. She was not looking at him. Merritt continued. The next right-side verbal cue produced the same hesitation. This time Vesper's ear shifted, but only the left one turned toward the sound. Merritt changed position before anyone could study the mistake. The work remained good after that. He relied more heavily on hand signals, allowing the movement to appear deliberate. Vesper followed every cue. For a few minutes, Merritt almost believed his own explanation. By late morning, the clean light had begun to change. Clouds gathered above the western peaks, first as a gray seam and then as a broad ceiling. The temperature rose just enough for snow to soften beneath their boots. Air that had been dry and sharp became damp. Dana looked toward the ridge. "That front arrived early," she said over the radio. Within 20 minutes, fine ice tapped against Merritt's sleeves. Then the ice became rain. It fell cold and steady across the snowpack, darkening tree trunks and loading the pine branches until they bent toward the ground. Water began to thread through boot prints. The bright training lanes blurred into gray-green woods. Dana's voice came through the radio. "All teams, terminate the exercise. Return by marked routes. Watch for falling limbs and soft snow near drainage cuts." Merritt acknowledged. He removed Vesper's long training line and clipped on the shorter lead. The dog shook rain from his coat, then stood close to Merritt's left knee. "You heard her," Merritt said. "Easy walk back." Vesper looked ahead. They moved downhill through weather that seemed to erase the morning behind them. The change in the forest was immediate. Snow slumped from branches in wet masses. Markers became harder to see. Somewhere farther north, a tree cracked under its own weight, the sound carrying through the rain like a rifle shot, softened by distance. Merritt felt Vesper's pace shorten. Not limp. Not yet. Just shorter. He adjusted his own speed without commenting on it. The decision came so naturally that it troubled him. A few minutes later, Vesper stopped. Merritt took another step before the lead tightened. "Come." Vesper did not move. The German shepherd stood with his head angled toward a dense stand of young pines below the main trail. Rain collected along his dark back. His nose lifted once, then lowered. Merritt waited. Vesper looked at him and sat. Not the relaxed sit of a tired dog, the alert. Merritt's attention narrowed. "What do you have?" Vesper turned his head toward the pines. Merritt heard rain striking leaves, water running beneath snow, the faint mechanical click of a cooling radio battery. Nothing else. Then it came. A small, broken sound. One bark, high and weak. Merritt raised a hand toward the team behind him. "Hold position." Dana approached, boots cutting through the wet snow. "What is it?" "Possible dog, downslope." The sound came again, not close enough to locate precisely, but real. Dana looked at the darkening woods, then at Vesper. "Report before moving." Merritt gave the coordinates over the radio, marked their departure from the main route, and requested the nearest medical team begin moving toward them. Then he looked down at Vesper. "Show me." Vesper rose. He did not charge into the trees. He moved carefully, nose low, following a narrow depression beneath the pines. Merritt stayed behind his shoulder, testing each step before committing weight. Rain had nearly erased the old maintenance path, but occasional reflective markers remained on low stakes. Several had been turned away or covered by slush. 30 yards below the main trail, they found tire tracks. The tracks crossed the snow at an angle and ended in a ditch. A compact hatchback sat tilted against the bank, its front wheel buried in soft snow and mud. The driver's door was open. A canvas animal carrier rested on the rear floor, empty. Merritt checked the vehicle quickly. No blood, no person. Keys remained in the ignition, though the engine was dead. A phone lay on the passenger seat with no service displayed. A mustard-colored glove had fallen beside the open door. Vesper sniffed it once and moved away from the road. Merritt followed him into thicker trees. The weak barking stopped. That concerned him more than the sound had. He found a broken branch at shoulder height, then a boot print half filled with rainwater. Another print appeared farther ahead, angled toward a low section of forest where several trees had fallen during an earlier storm. "Tessa!" a voice from the road called faintly. Dana had found the vehicle registration. Merritt did not answer. He wanted his ears clear. Vesper slowed beside a fallen pine. The dog's body changed, not rigid, not aggressive, but intensely careful. He looked beneath the overlapping branches, then back at Merritt. Merritt crouched. At first, he saw only the yellow of an outer jacket among wet needles. Then a face lifted. A young woman sat pressed against the trunk beneath the branches, her knees drawn close. Mud streaked one side of her face. Chestnut hair had come loose from a low tie and clung to her cheeks. Her skin looked pale beneath the freckles across her nose. She held something inside her coat. "Don't stand yet," Merritt said. "I wasn't planning to." Her voice was thin but alert. He moved closer, keeping his posture low. "What's your name?" "Tessa Rowan." "I'm Merritt Hale. Search team is coming." The bundle beneath her jacket shifted. A small, cream-colored head appeared. One ear stood crookedly while the other folded toward the side. The puppy gave a weak sound and tried to pull back into the warmth. Tessa's hands were shaking badly around him. "Check Cricket first," she said. Merritt looked at her fingers, the wet clothes, the color of her lips. "I'll check both of you. The dog first." There was no drama in the demand. No attempt to appear brave. Only exhausted certainty. Merritt had heard that tone before, from people who had narrowed the world to one responsibility because anything larger would have overwhelmed them. He placed 2 fingers against the puppy's chest. The heartbeat was fast, but steady. "Breathing well," he said. "Cold, but responsive." Tessa closed her eyes for 1 second. That single moment of relief told Merritt how long she had been holding herself together for the animal. He unfolded a compact weather tarp from his pack and anchored it between the trunk and 2 low branches. The material snapped in the wind, then settled into a slanted shield against the rain. Vesper lay down along the exposed side of Tessa's legs. The dog did not crowd her. He placed his body between the wind and the opening beneath the branches, his dark coat catching the rain. Tessa looked at him. "He's old," she whispered. Merritt's hand paused over the thermal blanket. "He's experienced." "That wasn't what I said." Merritt met her eyes. Despite the cold, something almost amused moved through them. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and Cricket. "What happened?" "My car slid." Her words came slowly. "No signal. I remembered an old maintenance shelter near the North Trail. I followed the winter stakes, but the markers disappeared when the rain started." "Why leave the car?" "The heater stopped. Cricket was already shaking." "You should have stayed near the road." "I know." The lack of argument removed the satisfaction from being right. "I thought the shelter was closer," she continued. "Then I lost the trail." "You were taking him somewhere?" "To Everett Sloan. He applied to adopt him." Merritt looked at the puppy. Cricket's oversized front paws rested against the edge of Tessa's sweater. A small white patch showed beneath his chin. "You chose weather like this for a delivery?" "It wasn't like this when I left." The answer came sharper. Merritt stopped. Again, he had decided too quickly. The radio crackled. Cole Ramsey announced he was less than 5 minutes away. Merritt relayed Tessa's condition and requested warmed fluids and a transport sled. While they waited, Tessa's gaze remained on Cricket. Her grip loosened only when Merritt assured her twice that the puppy was breathing normally. Vesper stayed beside her without moving. Merritt watched him. The German Shepherd's right hind leg rested at a slightly different angle from the left. Nothing dramatic. Nothing a stranger would notice. Merritt noticed. He looked away before the observation could become a conclusion. Cole Ramsey arrived with 2 rescuers and the quiet competence of a man who had spent years meeting people on bad days. He was 46, broad-faced, dark-haired, with silver beginning at the sides. A red and charcoal rescue jacket covered his compact frame. He crouched beside Tessa and spoke slowly while taking her temperature and checking her pulse. "Mild hypothermia," Cole said. "Dehydrated, exhausted, but alert. We'll take her in for observation." "Cricket?" Tessa asked. Cole looked at the puppy. "Warm, tired, and probably offended by winter." Tessa gave a small breath that might have become laughter in better weather. As the team prepared the sled, Vesper rose and moved toward Tessa's wet backpack. He lowered his nose near a strap half buried in slush and nudged something free. An old leather dog collar lay beneath it. The metal tag was scratched, but readable. "Harlan." Tessa reached for it at once. "Harlan's at the transit station," she said. "He's an older shepherd. The clasp broke. I was supposed to have it repaired." "You carried another dog's collar on an adoption run?" Merritt asked. "I was going past the repair shop." Her fingers closed around the worn leather. Cricket remained tucked inside her coat. Harlan's collar lay in her other hand. Her backpack bulged with paperwork, feed packets, and a folded blanket that clearly had not been meant for her. Merritt finally understood what had been bothering him. Tessa had not entered the forest carrying one responsibility. She had brought all of them. Cole and the rescuers lifted her onto the sled. Vesper stood watching as they moved back toward the road. Merritt gave the recall command from the dog's right side. "Vesper, here." The German shepherd continued looking after Tessa. Merritt raised his hand. Vesper turned immediately and came to him. Dana stood several yards away beneath the rain, her face unreadable. Her eyes moved from Merritt's raised hand to Vesper's tilted right ear. She had seen it. This time, so had Merritt. By the time the rescue vehicles reached the county winter station, the rain had turned the parking lot into a dark mirror. Water slid from the roofs in steady lines. Snowbanks sagged at the edges, their clean white surfaces collapsing into gray slush beneath the floodlights. Inside, the building smelled of damp wool, disinfectant, instant coffee, and the metallic heat of old radiators working harder than they had been designed to. Tessa Rowan sat on a narrow examination cot beneath 2 thermo blankets. Her mustard jacket hung from a hook near the door, dripping into a plastic tray. Without it, she looked smaller, though not weaker. Her chestnut hair had been towel-dried and tied loosely at the nape of her neck. Freckles stood out across her pale face. A sensor clipped to one finger glowed red each time she moved her hand. Cole Ramsey stood beside the cot, writing her temperature and pulse on a strip of medical tape attached to his glove. "You are staying here tonight," he said. "I understand." "You are not driving." "My car's in a ditch." "You would be surprised how many people consider that a temporary inconvenience." Tessa pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "I'm not asking to leave." Cole glanced at her. "You've asked 3 times when you can return to the transit station. That isn't the same thing. It becomes the same thing when you think nobody is listening." His voice remained slow and even. Cole did not sound annoyed. That made it difficult to argue with him. Merritt stood near the wall with his arms folded. Vesper lay at his boots, still damp around the shoulders, despite having been rubbed down twice. The dog no longer wore the canine harness. Merritt had removed it in the equipment room and placed it on a bench where he could see it through the open doorway. He told himself this was because the harness needed to dry. Across the hall, a puppy barked once. Tessa's head turned immediately. Cole placed 2 fingers against the inside of her wrist. "Stay where you are!" That was Cricket. That was a puppy making a sound in a building containing animals. It was Cricket. Merritt had known people who could distinguish engines by vibration, firearms by echo, and approaching aircraft through weather that erased everything else. He did not dismiss her certainty. He's with the veterinarian, he said. Tessa looked at him. I know where he is. Then why are you trying to stand? Because knowing where something is doesn't mean knowing it's all right. The answer landed closer to Merritt than she could have intended. He looked down at Vesper. The German shepherd's head rested on his front paws, but his left ear remained angled toward the hallway. The right ear sat slightly outward, unchanged by the noises around him. Merritt shifted his weight. Cole finished the assessment and removed the sensor from Tessa's finger. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, no confusion, no chest pain, no injuries that concern me right now. He pointed toward a paper cup on the bedside table. You drink that, then another. You eat when the kitchen brings something. You sleep here. Tomorrow morning we reassess. What time? Morning. That isn't a time. It is tonight. Cole turned to Merritt. If she tries to leave, don't physically stop her. Call me. Tessa gave him a flat look. I'm sitting right here. I know. I prefer instructions given in front of the person they concern. Cole left the room with his medical case. For a moment, the only sound was rain against the window and the soft breath of the radiator. Tessa reached toward the bedside table where someone had placed her recovered belongings. Harlan's old collar lay on top of her notebook. The leather had darkened from the rain. Her phone was not there. Where is it? She asked. Your phone? Yes. Drying beside your jacket. I need it. You need rest. Tessa looked at Merritt as though he had just confirmed a suspicion. I did not say I needed to walk out of here. I said I needed my phone. The station can wait until morning. No, it can't. It waited while you were in the woods. That is exactly the problem. Her voice did not rise, but something inside it sharpened. Vesper lifted his head. Merritt disliked arguments built from incomplete information. He disliked even more that he had already chosen a side before asking what the argument was about. What happened at the station? He said. Tessa hesitated. Perhaps she had expected another order. The heating unit in the West Kennel stopped working last night, she said. We moved the dogs into the central run. That holds for now, but the forecast changed. The cold front is coming faster. How many animals? 14 adult dogs. Merritt unfolded his arms. Staff? 2 regular volunteers this week. One is home with the flu, the other works mornings at a feed store. And you left to deliver a puppy. The heat was still holding in the central section when I left. Cricket had a scheduled placement, and getting one animal out gave us more room. You went alone? It was a normal transport when I started. In winter? In Washington, she replied. Winter isn't an emergency by itself. Merritt felt irritation rise, then caught the reason for it. She had an answer for every point because she had already asked herself the same questions. That did not make all her decisions correct. It did mean she had not wandered into the forest carelessly. When does the temperature drop? He asked. Tomorrow night, maybe sooner. The latest alert said the Arctic front could reach the valley by late afternoon. Merritt looked toward the rain-streaked window. The warmer air had already stripped weight from the snow. When the temperature fell again, every wet road in the valley would harden. Who is responsible for the station? He asked. I am the operations coordinator. That wasn't my question. Tessa held his gaze. Jory Pike is executive director. She's 62 and recovering from a bad respiratory infection. She works from home now. Does she know the heater failed? Yes. Does she know you are transporting alone? Yes. Does she know you are here? A pause. Not yet. Merritt took his own phone from his pocket and held it out. Tessa did not take it immediately. What? You said you needed a phone. Her expression shifted, though not into gratitude. Are you going to stand over me while I call? No. Are you going to tell me which calls to make? No. Are you going to take it back if I say something you disagree with? Merritt considered the question. No. Only then did she accept it. She opened the notebook beside Harlan's collar. Several colored tabs divided the pages. Numbers had been written in narrow columns, some crossed out, some circled in orange. Merritt expected panic to make her disorganized. Instead, Tessa became precise. She called Jory first. "Don't start," she said as soon as the older woman answered. "I'm safe." Merritt could hear a voice on the other end, loud enough to express alarm, but not clear enough to distinguish words. "I said I'm safe. Cricket is safe too. The car is not." Another pause. "No, I am not leaving tonight. Cole Ramsey has threatened to personally remove the tires from any vehicle I approach." From the hallway, Cole called, "Correct." Tessa closed her eyes briefly. Merritt looked away so she would not see the edge of amusement in his face. The conversation changed quickly from reassurance to logistics. Tessa asked about the central kennel temperature, the backup space in the laundry room, the condition of the portable heaters, the fuel level in the generator, and whether Harlan had eaten. At that name, Vesper rose. He crossed the small room and stopped beside the cot. Tessa rested one hand on the old collar while listening. "No, don't separate him," she said into the phone. "Move his bowl closer to the others. He won't eat alone." She wrote something in the notebook. "Call Naomi's office and ask whether the overnight tech can spare 2 insulated crate covers. Don't promise intake space to anyone else. No new arrivals until we know where the current dogs are going." Merritt watched the strain leave her face as work replaced uncertainty. It did not make her healthier. It made her feel permitted to exist. He recognized that too easily. After the call, she opened a second page. "Who next?" Merritt asked. "Foster homes." "How many confirmed?" 5. "For 14 dogs?" "Some can take pairs." "How many are actually prepared for large dogs?" Tessa looked up. "You said you weren't going to direct the calls." "I asked a question." "Those often become directions with you." Merritt pulled a chair from the wall and sat rather than continuing to stand over her. "All right," he said. "Your calls." She studied him, then began dialing. Over the next 40 minutes, North Cascades Animal Transit became visible to Merritt through fragments of conversation. It was not a permanent shelter. It served as a temporary bridge between animal control intake, veterinary recovery, foster placement, and larger rescue organizations west of the mountains. Dogs stayed days or weeks, rarely months. The building had once been a farm supply warehouse. Its heating system was old, its staff was thin, its budget depended on donations that arrived unevenly and grants that demanded more paperwork than compassion alone could satisfy. The facility was already scheduled to close after winter because the lease would not be renewed. Tessa had known for several weeks. She had not told every volunteer how quickly the remaining dogs would need to be moved. "I didn't hide the closure," she said after ending another call. "I delayed the full schedule." "Why?" "Because half the volunteer list only comes twice a month." "If they heard the place was closing, some would assume someone else was handling the transfers." "And the other half?" "They would panic and try to take dogs they weren't equipped to manage." "So you decided to manage the information." "I decided to buy time." Merritt looked at the notebook crowded with names, feeding notes, medication schedules, temperaments, and transport windows. "How much did you buy?" Tessa did not answer. That was answer enough. A knock sounded at the door. A woman entered carrying a small animal wrapped in a gray fleece towel. Dr. Naomi Bell did not announce authority, she brought it with her. She was 48 with warm brown skin, a black bob touched by silver, and thin frame glasses hanging from a leather cord at her neck. Blue-gray scrubs showed beneath a charcoal veterinary coat. Cricket's mismatched ears protruded from the towel. Tessa's face changed instantly. Not dramatically. Her shoulders simply dropped, as if someone had loosened a cord tied through her spine. "He's fine," Naomi said before Tessa could ask. "Cold and tired, no injury. He drank a little water and objected to the thermometer with impressive moral conviction." Cricket stretched toward Tessa. Naomi placed him carefully in her lap, then watched while Tessa checked his paws, ears, breathing, and belly as though verifying every word for herself. Merritt expected Naomi to correct her. She did not. She let Tessa finish. Only afterward did Naomi say, "He stays indoors tonight. Small meals, no further travel until tomorrow at the earliest." Understood. Naomi glanced at Merritt. "Senior Chief, a word." The tone made the request non-negotiable. Merritt followed her into a small storage office across the hall. Shelves held rescue blankets, medical kits, hand warmers, and batteries sorted into labeled plastic bins. Naomi closed the door. She removed a folded document from her coat pocket. "I was going to speak with you tomorrow," she said. "Dana tells me tomorrow arrived early." Merritt did not take the paper. "I know what it says." "Then read the signature line." "I've read it." "No, you read the recommendations and selected the interpretation that allowed you to continue." Her voice remained level. 3 weeks earlier, Naomi had evaluated Vesper after Merritt reported stiffness in the dog's right rear leg. Her conclusions had been careful but clear. No tactical deployments, no prolonged work over unstable terrain, limited evaluation only, immediate withdrawal if hearing or mobility changed. The morning exercise had technically fit within those limits when it began. What followed had not. "The weather changed," Merritt said. "The weather always changes." He performed. That is not the standard. He located a stranded person. That is an outcome. Naomi stepped closer and placed the report on a crate between them. "You keep presenting outcomes as proof that your decisions were sound. Sometimes people survive a bad decision. Sometimes dogs succeed despite one." Merritt's jaw tightened. "You weren't in the woods." "No! I examined him afterward. He is not injured. That is a very low definition of success." The words settled between them. Merritt glanced through the narrow window in the door. Vesper sat beside Tessa's cot while Cricket slept against her chest. "He still wants to work," Merritt said. Naomi followed his gaze. "Vesper wants to remain with you. You have spent years making work the place where that happens." Merritt looked at her. "That isn't medicine." "No, it is observation." The door opened before he could answer. Dana entered without removing her wet jacket. She had likely heard enough from the hallway to know where the conversation stood. "Vesper is finished with the course," she said. Merritt's voice cooled. "You're suspending him?" "I'm removing him from an activity he should already have left. He completed the search." Dana did not react. "You used hand signals to cover 2 missed verbal cues." Merritt said nothing. "I saw the second one on the ridge," she continued. "I saw the third at the vehicle." "He responded. To your hand." Dana placed a slim folder beside Naomi's report. Inside were the retirement transfer forms for Vesper. The top page named Merritt as the preferred adopter. "Finish these," Dana said. Merritt looked at the blank signature line. The paper seemed almost offensively ordinary. No ceremony, no last mission, no acknowledgement of the years represented by one empty box and a place for his name. "Not tonight," he said. Dana's expression did not change. "I didn't say tonight. I said finish them." She left. Naomi remained for another moment. "Rest him," she said, "not because he has failed, because he has not." Then she followed Dana out. Merritt stood alone with the papers. He had signed documents in worse rooms, rules of engagement, casualty reports, equipment losses, letters that had changed where people slept, traveled, served, and sometimes whether they returned home. None had asked him to admit that something precious was ending while it was still alive beside him. When he returned to Tessa's room, evening had darkened the windows. Cricket slept under her chin. The phone lay on the blanket beside a page of names and transport options. Vesper stood near the door with Harlan's collar in his mouth. Merritt had not seen him pick it up. The shepherd crossed to Tessa and placed the collar carefully on the chair beside her cot. Tessa smiled. "Harlan would hate you," she told him. Vesper sat. "He hates every confident male shepherd for the first 3 days. Then he refuses to eat unless they're nearby." Merritt leaned against the wall. "Not aggressive?" "No, just old and particular." "That sounds familiar." Tessa glanced at him. I assumed you meant the dog. I did. Of course. She ran her thumb over the damaged clasp. Harlan was surrendered when his owner went into assisted living. He doesn't understand why every room keeps changing, so he watches the other dogs. If they settle, he settles. Vesper lowered himself beside the chair. For the first time that day, Merritt looked at him without measuring performance. No stance, no response time, no angle of the rear leg. Just an old dog choosing to remain near another creature's worry. Tessa closed her notebook. I can coordinate tomorrow from the station, she said, but I need someone to look at routes, vehicle capacity, and which dogs can travel together. Merritt considered the request. It was work he understood. That was precisely why he needed to answer carefully. I'll help build the plan, he said. You make the placement decisions. Tessa studied him. No ordering people around because they hesitate. I make no promises about people who load crates badly. No turning the whole thing into a military operation. It already has 14 dependents, limited heat, unstable weather, and insufficient transport. The comparison is making itself. Her mouth moved at one corner. Partners, she said, not commander and subordinate. Merritt looked at the notebook, the collar, the sleeping puppy, and Vesper on the floor. Partners, he agreed. Later, in the small bunk room assigned to him, Merritt removed the brass compass from beneath his shirt and set it on the table. Beside it lay Vesper's adoption packet. He opened to the final page. The line waited beneath the words, Preferred Handler Transfer. Merritt picked up a pen. From the hallway came the soft scrape of Vesper turning on the floor outside the door. Merritt held the pen above the paper. He could sign operational orders without hesitation because orders belonged to a future already defined. This signature offered no mission, no timeline, no measure of success beyond care. After a long moment, Merritt set the pen down. The line remained empty. Morning returned to Methow Valley with an almost insulting brightness. The rain had passed east during the night, leaving the mountains washed clean beneath a hard blue sky. Sunlight struck the wet snow and turned every field into a sheet of white fire. Water still dripped from the eaves of the county station, but the temperature had already begun to fall. By evening, the roads would start freezing. By the following night, the cold front would own the valley. Cole Ramsey checked Tessa one final time near the station entrance. He wrapped a blood pressure cuff around her arm while she stood in borrowed boots and the same mustard jacket, now dry but permanently marked with mud along one side. You are cleared to leave, he said. Tessa reached for her bag. I hear a second sentence coming. No driving, no lifting crates, no pretending dizziness is a personality trait. I'm not dizzy. Cole looked at her. Good, then you'll have no difficulty obeying. Cricket waited inside a padded carrier near Naomi Bell's boots. The puppy had eaten breakfast and recovered enough energy to object loudly whenever the carrier door closed. His single upright ear appeared above the mesh like a small flag of protest. Merritt stood beside Vesper near the parking lot. The German Shepherd wore no harness that morning. A plain dark green lead ran from Merritt's hand to Vesper's leather collar. Without the olive tactical vest across his back, the dog looked less official and somehow older. The uneven black saddle in his coat was more visible, as was the slight loss of muscle around his right hip. Merritt had noticed that before. He had simply preferred noticing other things. Dana Mercer came down the station steps carrying a folder and a paper cup of coffee. The Navy does not own a fleet of heated animal transports, she said, and even if it did, you would not be borrowing one. I didn't ask. You looked like you were preparing to. My face is being misinterpreted a lot this week. Your face has spent 30 years requesting equipment without completing forms. She handed him a slip of paper. I called Caleb Frost. He runs winter logistics for the Cascades Veterans Relief Group. Civilian vehicles, civilian insurance, civilian decision. Merritt read the number. You called him before breakfast? Caleb considers 6 in the morning late. Dana lowered her voice. You are helping plan. You are not assuming command of a private rescue organization. I understood that yesterday. Understanding is not your weak point. She looked down at Vesper. The dog met her gaze calmly. Dana did not mention the unsigned adoption papers. That silence carried more pressure than another order would have. North Cascades Animal Transit sat 12 miles northeast of the county station, beyond a narrow road bordered by snow-covered orchards and black irrigation fences. The last mile descended into a sheltered valley where the mountains blocked most of the wind. From a distance, the facility looked almost peaceful. A converted farm warehouse stood at the center of the property, its faded green metal roof bright beneath the sun. A small timber office leaned beside it, connected by a covered walkway to two low kennel buildings. Snow rested smoothly along the fences. A wooden sign near the road bore the organization's name beneath a painted outline of a dog crossing a bridge. Nothing outside suggested urgency. Inside the main kennel, urgency had a sound. 14 dogs occupied a space intended for 8. Bark struck the walls and returned louder. Metal bowls scraped across concrete. Nails clicked, paced, stopped, then began again. Damp fur, disinfectant, kibble, and the overheated electrical smell of portable heaters crowded the air. The western kennel had been closed completely. A red tag hung from its door, and a maintenance panel lay open beneath a silent furnace. Tessa stepped inside and was immediately surrounded by recognition. Dogs pressed noses between gates. Tails struck walls. One brown hound began howling as though she had returned from a year-long voyage instead of one night away. "I'm fine," Tessa called, though none of the animals had asked. A volunteer hurried toward her from the central aisle. He was a college-aged man named Micah who worked mornings at a feed store and wore his green apron beneath a borrowed winter coat. His hair stood in damp curls around his forehead. "You're supposed to be in a hospital." It was a county station. That is not the important part of the sentence. Temperatures? 56 in the central run, 48 by the laundry door. Portable heaters are holding, but the breaker tripped once. Tessa's expression tightened. "Any new symptoms?" Lena coughed twice. Naomi's tech said monitor. Harlan still won't eat. At the far end of the central kennel, an old German shepherd lay with his back against the wall. Harlan was larger than Vesper, but more heavily aged. Gray covered nearly his entire muzzle and climbed above his eyes. His rear legs rested awkwardly beneath him. A bowl of untouched food sat near the gate. Tessa approached slowly. "Hey, difficult man." Harlan lifted his head. His eyes moved first to Tessa, then to Vesper. The old dog stiffened. Vesper stopped several feet away. Merritt shortened the lead, expecting tension. Vesper did not stare directly at Harlan or raise his head. He turned slightly sideways, sniffed the concrete, and lowered himself to the floor. No command, no signal. He simply lay down. Harlan watched him. The barking around them continued. Cricket squeaked inside the carrier. A heater clicked and rattled near the office door. After almost a minute, Harlan's head lowered. Tessa slid his bowl closer to the gate. He sniffed once but did not eat. Cricket began pawing at the carrier door. Naomi opened it, and the puppy tumbled out with the confidence of an animal who had forgotten every bad decision from the previous day. He crossed the floor toward the two shepherds. Merritt reached down. "Let him look," Naomi said. Cricket stopped between Vesper and Harlan. One ear stood up, the other folded over. He sniffed Vesper's front paw, then turned twice and dropped onto the floor as though the space had been prepared for him personally. Harlan stared at the puppy. Then, with visible reluctance, he leaned toward the bowl and took one mouthful. Tessa laughed. It was not polished or restrained. The sound escaped her before she could decide whether the moment deserved it. Several dogs barked in response. Cricket raised his head, pleased with the apparent effect. Merritt looked at Tessa. The tension had not left her face, but for a few seconds it had been forced to make room for something else. "That's the first thing Harlan has eaten since yesterday afternoon," Micah said. Naomi crouched near the gate. Do not turn this into a treatment protocol, she warned. He may be calmer because the room changed. He may like the puppy. He may simply be hungry. Tessa nodded. But he ate. He ate, Naomi agreed. The office door opened. Marjorie Pike came out carrying a green clipboard and a ring of keys large enough to suggest she had once been responsible for every lock in the county. Everyone called her Jory. At 62, she had a round, expressive face framed by short silver curls. Burgundy glasses hung low on her nose. A thick, moss-colored cardigan covered a cream blouse, and she walked carefully on one knee, without accepting help from the wall or anyone else. She looked first at Tessa. "You look terrible." Tessa folded her arms. "You sound disappointed." "I am deciding whether to hug you or fire you." "You can't fire me. The building is closing." The humor disappeared from the room almost at once. Micah looked down. Merritt saw Tessa realize too late that the sentence had reached someone she had not yet intended to tell fully. Jory removed her glasses. "Office," she said. They gathered around a scarred wooden table crowded with transport forms, medication logs, dog profiles, and 3 mugs of coffee in different stages of abandonment. Jory remained standing. "The board voted 6 weeks ago not to renew the lease," she said. "We stop new intake at the end of this week and complete transfers within 3 weeks." Micah stared at Tessa. "You said we had until spring." "I said the facility would close after winter." "That means spring." "It meant after the active winter intake period." "That is not what anybody heard." Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Jory placed both hands on the table. "The language was mine," she said. "I thought a gradual announcement would keep people from panicking." Tessa thought she could confirm placements before giving everyone the final schedule. "And now the heat is gone," Micah said. "1 unit is gone," Naomi corrected. "The central system is still functioning." "For how long?" No one answered immediately. The question altered the room. The closure had been administrative before. A date on a lease, a board vote, a controlled ending with forms and scheduled transfers. The failed furnace had changed it into time. Jory looked at Merritt. "Tessa says you know logistics." "I know enough to ask how many confirmed placements are real." 5 homes, Tessa said. 2 can take bonded pairs, 1 can only take a dog under 40 pounds. Naomi has 2 clinic holds if necessary. "That accounts for 9, possibly 10, Merritt said. "What about the others?" "1 regional shelter has offered 3 spaces, but they can't take them before next week." "Next week is no longer relevant," Tessa's eyes sharpened at the tone. Merritt caught himself. "What alternatives have been verified?" he asked instead. The difference was small. Tessa noticed it. They spread the files across the table. Each dog had its own limitations. 1 could not travel beside another male, 1 required refrigerated medication, 2 became distressed if separated. Harlan would not tolerate stairs and needed a low-entry vehicle. A young cattle dog mix had escaped from 3 previous foster yards and required secure fencing. The animals did not know the station was closing. They only knew their bowls, the shape of the gates, the times footsteps approached, and which voices meant food. That ignorance made the responsibility heavier, not lighter. Jory sank into a chair. "I should have been here more," she said. "You were sick," Tessa replied. "I was also tired. Those are not always the same thing." "You built this place." "And then I let you hold it up after the beams started failing." Tessa looked away. "I didn't ask you to." "No," Jory said. "That was how I knew I had taught you badly." The room went quiet. Merritt had expected blame to move in one direction. Older leader to younger worker, administrator to coordinator. Instead, both women were standing inside the same mistake from different sides. Jory had protected Tessa by trusting her competence beyond reason. Tessa had protected Jory by refusing to admit the work had exceeded her. Neither had intended harm. Good intentions had simply become a method for delaying reality. Merritt took Dana's slip from his pocket and called Caleb Frost. The man answered on the second ring. You need trucks, chains, heat, or common sense? All four. Common sense costs extra. Caleb's voice was rough with age and sleep, but he shifted immediately into practical questions. Number of animals, crate dimensions, road grades, medication, distance, timing. He owned 2 retired utility vans he had converted for winter relief work, both insulated and fitted with secured cargo rails and independently powered heaters. I can have them inspected and loaded by tomorrow morning, Caleb said. Earlier if the coffee at your place is not criminal. There is coffee. That did not answer the question. When the call ended, the plan began to take shape. Jory would verify every transfer authorization and contact the board's insurer. Naomi would call clinics, approved foster homes, and the regional shelter. Tessa would rebuild the placement list according to urgency rather than personal preference. Merritt would calculate routes, crate placement, fuel stops, and road alternatives. Dana would handle contact with the civilian veterans group but would not provide military vehicles or personnel. Everett Sloan would be called again about cricket, though no assumption would be made that the placement remained available. The work spread across the office. For the next 2 hours, the station changed from noise into categories. Red tags for urgent medical needs, blue for paired animals, yellow for transport restrictions, green for confirmed placement. Tessa moved between the office and the kennels, answering questions before they were fully spoken. Merritt marked routes on a county map and crossed out 2 mountain roads likely to freeze after sunset. Vesper remains near Harlan. At one point, Merritt called from the office doorway. Vesper! The dog's left ear turned. Merritt stood slightly to the right. Vesper looked toward Naomi instead. Merritt lifted his hand. The dog saw the signal and came immediately. Tessa had been carrying a stack of medication logs. She stopped. Merritt pretended not to notice. Later, he left his route folder open on the table while checking the dimensions of the kennel gates. Tessa searched beneath the map for a blank transfer form. A medical report slid free. She caught it before it reached the floor. Vesper Hale, Working Status Review. The document was dated 3 weeks earlier. She did not mean to read it. The first highlighted sentence was visible without effort. Discontinue tactical deployment and work on unstable terrain. Below it, monitor right-sided auditory response and rear limb mobility. Tessa looked through the office window. Merritt stood in the kennel aisle beside Vesper. The dog faced the wrong direction as Merritt spoke from his right, then turned only when the man moved into view. The same man who had criticized her for entering the woods after her car failed had brought an aging dog into winter training while already knowing the limits. Tessa folded the report and returned it to the folder. When Merritt came back, he found her standing beside the map. She did not accuse him immediately. That made him more guarded than anger would have. "You knew," she said. Merritt looked at the folder. "Yes." "Before yesterday?" "Yes." "And you still brought him?" It was a controlled evaluation. In winter terrain. Approved terrain. Until the weather changed. His expression hardened. The search was not planned. Neither was my car leaving the road. That is different. Why? Merritt did not answer. Tessa's voice remained quiet. I'm not asking whether Vesper can still do good work. He clearly can. She looked through the window at the old shepherds lying several feet apart, Cricket asleep between them. I'm asking whether you're helping him keep living. Her eyes returned to Merritt. Or only extending the part of his life you aren't ready to lose. Merritt stood motionless beside the map. Outside the office, 14 dogs shifted behind their gates, unaware that the building around them had already been given an ending. For several seconds after Tessa's question, the office seemed to contract around Merritt. The county map lay open between them. Colored route lines crossed the valley in red, blue, and black. Dog profiles covered one end of the table. Beyond the window, the central kennel moved with restless life, tails striking gates, bowls sliding over concrete, 14 animals shifting inside a building already marked for closure. Merritt kept his hands flat against the table. You saw one report, he said. I saw enough to know you already knew. You saw clinical language. You did not see the years before it. I didn't say I did. You don't know what Vesper has done. Tessa's expression remained steady. No. You don't know what it means to trust a dog with your life, or what it means when other people trust him with theirs. I know that too. No, you don't. His voice had sharpened enough to draw Micah's attention from the far end of the kennel. Tessa closed the office door. Merritt noticed the movement and resented it, although she had done it to protect him from being overheard. Vesper has worked in conditions where one missed signal mattered, he continued. He has found people no machine could find. He has stayed in place when men twice his size lost judgment. You do not reduce that to a bad hip and one ear. I'm not reducing him. That question did. Tessa glanced through the glass at Vesper. The German shepherd had returned to Harlan. Both old dogs lay several feet apart, not touching. Cricket slept between them, curled into a pale knot against the concrete. I wasn't asking whether his work mattered, she said. I was asking whether it has to continue for him to matter now. Merritt looked away. He had faced louder confrontations with less difficulty. Anger was easier when the other person wanted to defeat him. Tessa did not. She only refused to step back. That sounds simple from where you're standing, he said. It isn't. You've known him 2 days. I'm not claiming to know him. Then don't tell me what he needs, Tessa drew a breath. All right. The quick surrender caught him off guard. She moved the medication logs aside and sat at the table. 1 year ago, we took in a dog named Juno, she said. Merritt said nothing. Tessa did not look at him while she continued. 13 years old, husky mix, clouded eyes, bad teeth, arthritis in both front legs. His owner died and the relatives couldn't keep him. We were supposed to hold him for 10 days until a foster home in Wenatchee had space. Outside the office, a dog barked 3 times and stopped. The foster family was quiet, Tessa said. Retired couple, no other animals, fenced yard. They had experience with senior dogs. Then why didn't he go? Because I kept finding reasons, she folded her hands. First, I said the road was too long. Then I said he needed another blood panel. Then I decided they didn't understand his feeding routine. I convinced myself he would be frightened without me. What happened? He stayed here for 6 more weeks. Tessa looked toward the central run. At night, he paced because the other dogs barked. During the day, new people came through the kennel. He stopped sleeping deeply. He started refusing food unless I sat beside him. That sounds like attachment. That is what I called it. Her voice did not carry self-pity. That made the admission harder. The foster family kept checking in. Finally, Jory told me I either completed the transfer or admitted I had no intention of following the placement plan. And you transferred him. I cried in the parking lot like someone had taken my own dog. She gave a small, humorless smile. 2 weeks later, they sent a video. Juno was sleeping on a rug beside their stove. He didn't wake when the mail carrier came. He had gained weight. He was walking in the yard without checking every doorway for me. Merritt stared at the route map. I had told myself I was the only person he trusted, Tessa said. The truth was that I had made myself necessary by keeping him in a place where he couldn't settle. She looked up. I'm not calling you selfish. I'm saying devotion can become control while still feeling like love. The anger in Merritt did not disappear. It lost its target. He pushed away from the table and walked into the kennel. Vesper lifted his head when Merritt entered the aisle. The dog did not rise. Months ago, Merritt would have corrected that automatically. Not harshly, a sound, a gesture, a reminder that attention came before comfort. Now he let the dog remain down. He stopped near the gate. Harlan's gray muzzle rested on his paws. Cricket had rolled onto his back, one oversized front foot pressed against Vesper's leg. Vesper looked at Merritt with his amber eyes. No guilt, no demand. No understanding of retirement papers or medical recommendations. Only recognition. Merritt reached into the collar of his shirt and drew out the old brass compass. The casing had been worn smooth in places by years beneath his thumb. "The first time I worked with him," he said, "he ignored me for 3 days." Tessa had followed but stayed near the office doorway. "That must have been difficult for you." "He liked the previous handler better." "What happened to the previous handler?" "Transferred." Merritt turned the compass in his palm. "They paired Vesper with me because I was patient." Tessa's eyebrows rose slightly. "I can be patient." "With dogs?" "With anything that follows a clear process." "That is not the same thing." "No." The admission came more easily than he expected. He leaned against the kennel partition. "For 33 years, every part of my life has had a structure. Wake time, briefing, training, deployment, return, assessment, repeat." He glanced down at the map visible through the office door. "Even grief had paperwork." Tessa remained silent. Merritt had not planned to say any of this. He disliked personal disclosures that arrived before he had arranged them properly. They felt like unsecured equipment. "I've rented apartments near bases," he continued, "stored furniture I never used, bought kitchen things because an apartment was supposed to have them. I have plates that have survived 3 moves because they stayed in the box." "You never settled anywhere?" "I lived where the work required." "That isn't what I asked." "No." The dogs shifted around them. A heater cycled on with a dull mechanical hum. "My father died 15 years ago," Merritt said. "My sister lives in Arizona. We speak at Christmas and when one of us remembers a birthday. I have people I trust, but trust and proximity are different things." Vesper raised his head higher. "He is the only living thing that went from one part of my life into the next without needing me to explain why I had changed." Merritt closed the compass in his fist. "If he retires, I retire. Not eventually, not in theory. It becomes real." Tessa's voice softened. "And then?" "That is the problem." The words were almost too quiet to hear beneath the barking. He had spent years imagining retirement as an administrative line he would cross with the same discipline he brought to everything else. He had expected the future to reveal itself once the present ended. Instead, there was only blank space, no assignment waiting, no team expecting him, no clear measure for whether he was succeeding. Vesper pushed himself upright. His rear legs took an extra second to organize beneath him. Merritt saw it. This time he did not rename it fatigue. The office phone began ringing. Tessa went to answer. "North Cascades Animal Transit, this is Tessa." She listened, then looked toward Cricket. "Yes, Mr. Sloan. He's safe." Merritt returned to the office as she put the call on speaker. Everett Sloan's voice carried the quiet roughness of an older man unused to telephones. "I've got a problem with the road," he said. "County plow says there was a small slide past Miller Bend. Snow and branches, nobody hurt, but they won't open it today." Tessa looked at the transport schedule. "We can postpone Cricket until tomorrow." There was a pause. "That isn't the only reason I called," Everett said. Tessa's hand stopped above her notebook. "All right." "I've been thinking," Merritt recognized the caution in the man's voice. Not indecision exactly. The effort of saying something before shame could change it. "My wife handled the animals," Everett said. "I built things. She knew feeding schedules, vaccinations, how to make a frightened dog stop shaking. I knew how to repair the gate after the dog found a way through it." "You completed the adoption preparation," Tessa said. "Your references were good." "References don't hear the house at night." No one answered. "My wife died 18 months ago," Everett continued. "Since then, the place has been quiet. I complained about that. Then I got used to it." His breath moved close to the receiver. "I'm not sure whether I applied for Cricket because I'm ready for a dog or because I'm tired of hearing how empty the rooms are." Tessa glanced at Cricket through the office window. The puppy was awake now, gnawing ineffectively on the edge of a folded blanket. "We can cancel the placement," she said at once. "There are other applicants." The sentence came too quickly. Merritt saw the relief and disappointment cross her face together. Everett heard only the words. I didn't say no. You said you weren't sure. That seems like something I should be sure about. Exactly. So we'll find another home. Merritt leaned closer to the phone. Mr. Sloan, this is Merritt Hale. The Navy man? Formerly, almost. Tessa gave him a look. Merritt ignored it. You don't have to decide today, he said. I signed an application. You signed an application to be evaluated, not a guarantee that a puppy would arrive regardless of circumstances. Tessa started to speak, but Merritt lifted one finger. Not to silence her, he told himself, only to ask for a moment. Her expression suggested she did not appreciate the distinction. When the road opens, Merritt continued, come meet the dog. I met him once. Meet him again. Everett was quiet. No commitment, Merritt said. No handoff at the door. Sit with him. Let him ignore you. Let him choose something you own. Then decide. You make adoption sound like equipment testing. Equipment is more predictable. A faint sound came through the speaker. Not quite laughter, but close. Tessa's shoulders eased. I can come when the road clears, Everett said. That works, she replied, slower this time. After the call ended, she looked at Merritt. You stopped me from closing the placement. I stopped you from closing it before either of you had decided. He could still say no. Yes. And then Cricket loses time. Possibly. Tessa glanced at the puppy. Merritt recognized her discomfort. Uncertainty demanded patience, and patience removed the illusion of control. You wanted to end it before he could disappoint you, Merritt said. That is not what happened. It looked familiar, her eyes narrowed. Be careful. One honest conversation does not make you an expert on me. No, he accepted the correction. But was I wrong? Tessa did not answer. Naomi entered carrying Vesper's olive harness. She had cleaned the mud from the buckles. The fabric still showed years of wear where straps had rubbed against the dog's shoulders. This is no longer working equipment, she said. Merritt looked at the harness. That sounded ceremonial. It is a medical decision. Those can be ceremonial. Naomi held it out. Vesper is removed from active duty status effective today. Limited low-impact evaluations may be considered later under veterinary approval, but no field deployment, no tactical exercise, no unstable terrain. Merritt took the harness. Its weight was familiar. He had lifted it thousands of times without thinking. Now every buckle seemed to contain a history too large for the object. A rectangular canine patch remained attached to the side panel. Merritt peeled it free. The hook and loop fastening made a rough tearing sound. Vesper turned his head. Merritt placed the patch in his shirt pocket. He did not hand it to Naomi. He did not put it away. Naomi noticed but said nothing. The rest of the afternoon filled with ordinary work. Transport crates were measured, medication packets were labeled, Jory called the insurer twice and the county road office 3 times. Tessa rebuilt Cricket's placement notes without marking Everett as confirmed or rejected. Merritt continued giving Vesper commands without realizing it. Stay. The dog remained beside Harlan. Come. Vesper looked toward him, then lowered his head again. Merritt nearly repeated the command. Instead, he stopped. A few minutes later, Vesper rose on his own and crossed the aisle to lie near a nervous cattle-dog mix. The younger dog paced behind its gate, circling until Vesper settled across from it. Merritt felt an unexpected irritation. The dog was choosing where to stand, where to lie, when to move. Nothing about the choices was disobedient. There was simply no longer a task requiring obedience. Merritt reached toward the canine patch in his pocket. Then he let his hand fall. By evening, the kennel quieted. Not completely. A building with 14 dogs never became silent. But feeding was finished, the lights were lowered, and exhaustion had softened most of the restless movement. Vesper lay beside Harlan. The 2 old shepherds no longer kept several feet between them. Their backs rested near the same section of gate, close enough that the fur along their shoulders almost touched. Cricket slept in a crate nearby, his cloth fish toy trapped beneath one paw. Merritt sat on an overturned feed bucket across the aisle. Vesper had no harness, no patch, no current assignment. His silver muzzle rested on the floor. His right ear leaned outward. His breathing was slow and deep in a way it rarely became during work. For years, Merritt had evaluated the dog by readiness. Could he rise? Could he track? Could he hold? Could he continue? Now, for the first time, Merritt tried to observe something else. Could he rest? The answer lay in front of him. Vesper slept beside another aging dog, untroubled by the absence of a command. Merritt remained on the bucket long after the kennel lights dimmed, holding the removed canine patch inside his pocket. He did not call Vesper back to his side. The cold front was no longer a possibility by sunrise. It had become a deadline. The updated forecast arrived at 5:18 a.m., printed from the county emergency system and taped to the office wall beside the transport board. Temperatures would begin falling before dusk. By midnight, the valley could reach 12 below zero, with colder pockets along the shaded roads east of the river. The rain-soaked snow from 2 days earlier would harden into ice. Every route would become less forgiving by the hour. Tessa stood beneath the forecast in a rust-colored canvas jacket, drinking coffee she had forgotten to taste. Her chestnut hair was twisted into a loose knot, and an orange marker was tucked behind one ear. She had rewritten the transport list twice since 4 in the morning. 14 dogs, 7 confirmed destinations, 3 vehicle routes, 1 closing facility. Merritt studied the county map spread across the office table. He had marked exposed grades, shaded roads, fuel stops, turnaround points, and places where a vehicle could safely wait if another fell behind. He had also written the name of a responsible person beside each route. That detail had taken him longer than the roads. For most of his career, assigning responsibility had meant establishing command. This morning, it meant ensuring no one person carried the whole operation. Jory Pike sat beside him with her green clipboard and reading glasses low on her nose. "Route 2 cannot leave before 9, she said. "The foster family in Winthrop has a medical appointment." "Then Route 2 becomes the shortest run," Merritt replied. "The clinic holds go first with Naomi." Tessa pointed to another name. "Bramble and Lena travel together. Separating them in the vehicle will make both worse." Merritt shifted 2 crate symbols on the map. "Then they go in Caleb's larger van." No one saluted. No one waited for him to approve the room. The plan improved anyway. Outside, engines rumbled into the yard. Caleb Frost arrived first in a faded Navy utility van, with a second vehicle following behind. Both had high roofs, winter tires, secured interior rails, rubber flooring, and compact auxiliary heaters mounted behind protective grills. Caleb stepped down wearing insulated brown overalls beneath an old mechanic's jacket. He was broad through the middle, thick-armed and red-cheeked from the cold. A silver mustache covered most of his upper lip. He carried a dented metal travel mug in one hand and a tire gauge in the other. "I was promised coffee," he said. "There's a pot in the office," Merritt replied. Caleb looked through the open door. "I was promised coffee." Jory pointed toward a thermos on the filing cabinet. "That one came from town." Caleb nodded solemnly. "Now this is an organized operation." The feed store owner delivered 8 transport crates on a flatbed. Naomi arrived with 2 veterinary technicians, both dressed in Navy insulated jackets and carrying medication coolers. Dana came only long enough to confirm that the Veterans Relief Group had completed its insurance forms and that no military vehicle, equipment, or personnel had been assigned to the transfer. She handed Merritt a packet. "Civilian problem, civilian resources." "Understood. Do not turn it into a field exercise." "I made route cards." "That is exactly the kind of sentence I meant." Dana glanced toward Vesper. The old shepherd stood beside the office steps wearing only his cognac leather collar. No harness, no tactical lead. His right ear leaned outward while the left tracked the movement of vehicles around the yard. Dana crouched and touched 2 fingers to the side of his neck. "You supervise him," she told Merritt, "not the other way around." Then she left before he could answer. Loading began at 7:30. The station changed character as soon as the first crate entered the kennel. Dogs that had tolerated the crowded room became uneasy at the sight of open carriers, unfamiliar blankets, and people moving with purpose. Barking rose sharply. One dog spun in tight circles, another pressed flat against the back wall of her run. Tessa moved from gate to gate, explaining routines to volunteers. Let him see the door before you guide him. Keep her medication bag attached to the outside of the crate. Do not pull against the leash when she freezes. Give her space and try again. Merritt resisted the instinct to correct everyone at once. Instead, he stayed at the transport board and called out only the details that affected safety. Crate 23 goes low. Secure both corners. Medication cooler stays in the heated cab. Route 3 confirms departure before Route 1 uses the East Drive. The distinction mattered. He was coordinating movement, not controlling every hand. Vesper rested near a row of prepared crates. He had no formal role. Naomi had made that clear. He would remain with Merritt, take frequent breaks, and never enter a crowded run without permission. Still, several dogs noticed him. A narrow-faced hound named Lena had been trembling since dawn. Her body shook even while she stood still, and she refused to approach the crate assigned to her. Vesper lay 10 feet away, turned slightly sideways. He did not stare at her. After a minute, Lena stopped pulling against her handler. Her breathing remained fast, but she lowered her head and sniffed the edge of the crate. Tessa watched from the aisle. He's calmer without the vest, she said. Merritt looked at Vesper. He was calm with it. That isn't what I said. The echo of their first conversation in the forest might once have irritated him. Now it made him pay attention. Vesper was not waiting for the next command. His shoulders were lower, his mouth hung slightly open. When footsteps passed behind him, he looked but did not rise. A younger volunteer brought a large black and tan mixed breed toward the loading area. The dog had a broad head, powerful chest, and a history note warning of defensive behavior around unfamiliar males. The moment he saw Vesper, his body stiffened. A low growl rolled through his chest. Vesper lifted his head. Merritt moved immediately. Back! This time he did not expect the verbal cue alone to be enough. He stepped into Vesper's left field of hearing, gave the hand signal, and guided him away without tension on the lead. Vesper followed. The other dog relaxed once the distance widened. Naomi met Merritt's eyes. No compliment, no correction, only acknowledgement that he had read the situation instead of trying to prove Vesper could manage it. Tessa exhaled. So he doesn't calm everyone. No dog does. People like stories where one good animal fixes all the others. People like stories that save them from learning details. Merritt took Vesper to the heated office and gave him water. For once, he did not calculate how quickly the dog could return. He let Vesper decide when to lie down. By 10, the first route was ready. Naomi's team took 3 dogs with medical needs to 2 clinics west of the valley. Caleb led the second route with 4 dogs, including Harlan, whose crate had been fitted with a low ramp and thick bedding. Harlan refused to enter at first. He planted his stiff rear legs and looked back toward the central kennel. Vesper stood beside Merritt 20 feet away. The 2 shepherds watched each other. Merritt almost stepped forward. Tessa placed a hand lightly against his sleeve. Give him a minute. Harlan sniffed the ramp. Caleb crouched near the van without touching him. No hurry, old man, he said. I've got a heater and poor music. Both are waiting. Harlan took 1 step, then another. He entered the crate without Vesper moving closer. Merritt felt something in his chest ease at the same time. Harlan had not needed Vesper to lead him. He had only needed enough calm around him to make his own choice. The first 2 routes departed beneath a sky turning slowly white. Tessa remained at the station with Merritt, Jory, Cricket, Vesper, and the last 7 dogs. Their placements were closer, but more complicated. 2 needed to travel together. 1 could only be received after noon, Cricket's transfer to Everett remained postponed. At 11:40, Tessa's phone rang. She answered while checking a crate latch. Her expression changed before she spoke. "You're certain?" Merritt looked up. Tessa turned away from the volunteers, though not far enough to conceal the conversation. "No, I understand. If the road is unsafe, don't attempt it." She listened. "Yes, thank you for telling me now." When she ended the call, she stood motionless with the phone in her hand. "Which placement?" Jory asked. "The McKenna Foster." "For Rowan and Pike?" Tessa nodded. The two large dogs were both difficult placements. Rowan, a shepherd mix, required secure fencing. Pike, a heavy brown mastiff mix, panicked during separation and had never traveled without Rowan beside him. "Their driveway iced over," Tessa said. "A delivery truck slid into the lower gate. No one is hurt, but they can't receive the dogs today." Jory checked the list. "The regional shelter?" "Full until tomorrow afternoon." Naomi's clinics had already taken their maximum emergency holds. The station's western kennel had no heat. The Arctic front was hours away. Tessa looked through the office window at the two dogs waiting in adjacent runs. "I'll take them." Merritt did not answer immediately. "My apartment allows one dog under 40 pounds, she continued. "But it's one night. I can clear the living room, put one crate in the kitchen." "No," Jory said. "I'm not leaving them here." "You would violate your lease, overcrowd the apartment, and have no safe way to separate them if either panics." "They don't separate." "That creates a different problem," Naomi said. "You are still recovering. Two large dogs in a small second-floor apartment is not a temporary inconvenience." Tessa reached for the marker behind her ear. She pressed the cap against her thumbnail. "We have nowhere else." Merritt watched her face. She was no longer evaluating options. She was searching for the version of sacrifice that would allow her to stop feeling responsible. He walked to the transport board and removed the McKenna card. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making the list accurate." "I said I'll take them." "You offered yourself because the plan failed." "They need a place." "Yes." "And I have one." "No." "You have a room that cannot safely hold them and a lease that prohibits them." Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide that for me." Merritt remembered the county station, his phone in her hand, and the promise not to turn questions into orders. He lowered his voice. "I'm not ordering you not to do it." "That sounds exactly like what you're doing. I'm asking whether you are solving their problem or punishing yourself because you couldn't keep the plan intact." The office went quiet. Jory looked down at her clipboard. Naomi found sudden interest in the medical cooler. Tessa stared at Merritt. "That is an unfair question." "Probably." "You don't know what I'm thinking." "No." "Then don't act like you do." Merritt nodded. "All right. Tell me why your apartment is the best safe placement." Tessa opened her mouth. Nothing came. Outside, Pike barked once when Rowan moved away from the shared gate. Tessa looked toward them, her shoulders lowered. "It isn't," she said. The admission sounded like defeat. Merritt understood why. For Tessa, not taking the dogs did not feel like recognizing a limit. It felt like abandoning them. An engine entered the yard before anyone could speak again. An old green pickup rolled through the gate with snow packed around its wheel wells. Two wooden transport kennels were strapped securely in the bed beneath a canvas cover. Everett Sloan stepped down from the cab. He was 67, lean beneath a tobacco-colored canvas vest and a dark chore coat. White-gray hair curled past the edges of a rust-colored knit cap. A short silver beard covered his narrow jaw. He moved with the careful balance of a man whose body had spent decades lifting lumber and climbing ladders. A folding wooden ruler protruded from one pocket. Cricket saw him through the office window and barked. Everett looked toward the sound, then away before hope could become expectation. "I heard you lost a placement," he said. Tessa stepped outside. "How?" "Caleb called from the road. Man cannot transport a dog without also transporting news." Everett walked to the truck bed and lifted the canvas. The two kennels were low, wide, and sturdier than anything the station owned. "My wife and I built these for older dogs," he said, "before she died." He touched one of the latches, checking it without needing to. "The workshop is heated. Concrete floor, separate side entrance, fenced loading yard. They can stay there tonight. The foster family from the regional list can collect them tomorrow if the road clears." Tessa looked at him. "You came for Cricket?" "No." The word was gentle but direct. "I came because I have room for one night and equipment that is doing nothing." Everett glanced toward the puppy inside. "I'm still thinking about Cricket." Tessa seemed uncertain whether to be relieved or disappointed. Everett did not ask her to decide which. Naomi inspected the kennels and the workshop arrangements by phone with Jory. The temporary placement was added under the organization's emergency foster authorization. Everett signed the forms before either dog was loaded. He did not describe himself as ready. He simply made the space ready. Rowan and Pike were transferred into the wooden kennels with less difficulty than expected. Everett secured every latch twice, then tied the canvas so air could circulate without exposing the dogs to the cold. Before climbing into the truck, he looked at Tessa. "Sometimes all I can promise is until morning." Tessa glanced at the two dogs. "Sometimes that's the promise we need." The final routes left shortly after 3. Merritt drove the smaller, heated van with Tessa in the passenger seat and Vesper resting behind them in an open, secured area, separate from the transport crates. Cricket traveled with Naomi in the last vehicle. The valley changed as they drove. Sunlight disappeared behind a flat lid of cloud. Water on the road turned glassy along the edges. Farm fences cast blue shadows across the snow. At each stop, breath became thicker in the air. The work was repetitive and demanding rather than dramatic. Park, verify address, check identification, review medication, unload safely, confirm signatures, call the station, move again. One foster family had prepared a quiet basement room. Another had removed rugs because the incoming dog chewed fabric when anxious. An elderly couple stood together in their driveway, listening carefully as Tessa explained how to avoid touching a frightened dog over the head. At every stop, Tessa checked the names twice before crossing them from her list. By the time the final dog entered an approved foster home, darkness had settled across Methow Valley. The temperature was falling quickly. They returned to North Cascades Animal Transit just after 7. The yard was empty. Inside, the central kennel sounded wrong. No barking, no pacing, no bowls dragged over concrete. Only the portable heaters and the faint hum of fluorescent lights remained. 14 gate doors stood open. Jory walked through the aisle, turning off lights one section at a time. Her large key ring hung from one hand. Tessa stopped in the center of the building. "We did it," Micah said from behind her. His voice sounded too loud in the emptiness. Tessa touched the latch of Harlan's old gate. "We emptied it." "That was the point," Micah replied. She did not answer. Merritt understood the difference. Success on the transport board looked like absence in the room. Jory came to stand beside Tessa. "This building was never the work," she said. "It held the work. For a while. I should have kept it going." "With what money?" Tessa looked away. "With which furnace?" Jory continued. "Which staff? Which lease?" "I could have found something." "Yes," Jory said. "You always can. That is why no one noticed what it cost you until the system was already leaning on one person." Tessa's eyes filled, though she did not cry. Jory placed the final kennel key in her palm. A building closing does not make the lives that pass through it less safe. The last lights went dark. Outside, Caleb's vans waited with frost beginning to form along the windows. Vesper lay inside Merritt's vehicle, silver muzzle resting on his front paws. He had spent the day traveling without performing a single official task. No search, no alert, no command sequence. He had simply been present. Merritt stood beside the open door. In the old logic of his life, usefulness had always required measurable action. A target found, a route secured, a task completed. Yet the dogs had reached safety through dozens of small contributions, none sufficient alone. Tessa's records, Jory's authority, Naomi's medical judgment, Caleb's vehicles, Dana's boundaries, Everett's heated workshop, volunteers loading crates correctly, Vesper lying still when stillness helped and leaving when it did not. Merritt looked back at the dark station. Its ending had not erased what it had done. Perhaps a role could end the same way. Not as proof that it had failed, as proof that it had carried something as far as it could. He closed the van door gently against the deepening cold. For 3 days after the last dog left North Cascades Animal Transit, no one knew what to do with the quiet. The building had never truly been silent before. Even at night, pipes knocked inside the walls, dogs shifted against kennel gates, and someone always remembered a medication dose, a loose latch, or a blanket left in the dryer. Now the central run stood empty. Jory Pike moved through the office with a cardboard box balanced against her hip, removing years one object at a time. Old intake binders went to county storage. Veterinary records were sealed for transfer. Photographs came down from the corkboard, leaving pale rectangles behind. Tessa sat at the main desk sorting keys into labeled envelopes. The orange marker behind her ear had dried out hours ago. She kept forgetting to replace it. "What does the laundry room key open now?" she asked. "Nothing," Jory said. "Then why are we keeping it?" "Because I am not emotionally prepared to throw away a key before lunch." Tessa placed it in an envelope marked Archive. "That is not what archive means." "It is today," Jory smiled, but the expression tired quickly. At the doorway, Merritt watched them work. He had come to collect 2 folded transport blankets and a crate divider Caleb had left behind. That was the practical reason. The less practical reason was that he had nowhere else he was expected to be. Vesper stood beside him in his leather collar, looking into the vacant kennel aisle. The dog did not pull forward or search the gates. He sniffed once, then leaned lightly against Merritt's leg. Merritt rested a hand on his shoulder. No harness waited on the wall. No equipment check remained to be completed. In 4 days, Merritt's own retirement orders would become final. He had imagined that date for years as a clean boundary. Instead, the days leading to it felt like walking across a frozen lake after hearing the first low crack beneath the ice. Jory closed another box. "What will you do with the apartment?" she asked Tessa. "Keep paying rent, apparently." "I meant after this week." Tessa looked at the empty desk. "I don't know." That answer had become common among them. Jory did not know what retirement would look like after building a rescue organization around every waking hour. Tessa did not know who she was when no frightened animal required an immediate decision. Merritt did not know what his mornings would be without a schedule written by someone else. Vesper appeared to be handling uncertainty better than all of them. Merritt's phone vibrated. The message came from a private security company based in Virginia. They had contacted him twice before, once through a former colleague and once through a recruiter who used phrases such as operational maturity and leadership continuity. This time the email contained a formal offer. 6-month consulting contract, advanced training oversight, travel to 3 domestic sites and 1 overseas facility. Compensation large enough to make hesitation appear irresponsible. The work would be familiar. Briefings, assessments, training schedules. Men and women waiting for Merritt to tell them what they had missed. He read the attachment twice. Then he locked the screen. Tessa noticed. "Bad news?" "No." "That looked more complicated than good news." "It's work." "You already have work." "For 4 more days." She waited. Merritt disliked people who knew silence could be used as a tool. "Security consulting," he said. "Training and evaluation." "Where?" "Several places." "Meaning not here." "Meaning travel." Tessa looked down at the envelopes. "And Vesper?" Merritt's answer came too quickly. "Naomi can help arrange care." Vesper looked up at the sound of his name. Tessa did not challenge him. That was worse. She only said, "I see." Merritt put the phone away. He had expected the offer to feel like rescue. Instead, it felt like a door back into a room he already knew how to survive. Across the valley, another possible future arrived for Tessa in a cleaner envelope. The veterinary clinic in Seattle had offered her a full-time position coordinating medical transfers and foster placements. The salary was steady, the insurance was better than anything the transit station had ever provided. The clinic had 6 paid staff members, written protocols, emergency coverage, and a building whose furnace had been replaced the previous year. It was, by every measurable standard, a sensible job. Tessa read the offer while sitting in Naomi Bell's waiting room with Cricket asleep beneath her chair. She should have felt relief. Instead, she kept looking through the glass door toward the mountains. "You could answer them," Naomi said from behind the reception desk. "I could. That usually requires typing. I know how email works." Naomi removed her thin-framed glasses. "Then the obstacle is not technical." Tessa folded the letter. "They want an answer by Friday." "What do you want?" "A job." "That is not the same question." Tessa reached down to check Cricket. The puppy opened one eye, saw nothing urgent, and went back to sleep. Everett Sloan arrived carrying a small, unfinished wooden box beneath one arm. He had visited the clinic 4 times since the roads reopened. He never called the visits adoption meetings. He called them stopping by. Cricket had greeted the first visit by hiding beneath a metal chair. During the second, the puppy had chewed the lace from Everett's boot and then refused to be touched. On the third, Everett sat on the floor for 40 minutes while Cricket slept behind a wastebasket. Everett had not complained. That morning, he lowered himself onto the waiting room floor with the stiffness of a man whose knees remembered every winter he had worked outdoors. "What are you making?" Tessa asked. "Storage box." "For what?" "Depends what fits." He set the box between his boots and began smoothing one corner with a small piece of sandpaper. Cricket lifted his head. Everett did not call him. The puppy walked around the chair, keeping a cautious distance. A metal tray dropped in the treatment room, striking the floor with a sharp clang. Cricket flinched and retreated. Everett kept sanding. He did not reach out. He did not tell the puppy everything was fine, when Cricket had already decided it was not. After a few minutes, Cricket returned. He sniffed the box, then Everett's sleeve. Everett continued working as though the inspection had no importance. Tessa watched the space between them. She had once believed a good placement should reveal itself quickly. A dog would approach, a person would smile, and affection would make the decision obvious. Real trust was less photogenic. It involved repetition, waiting, accepting that an animal might prefer the underside of a chair to the person offering a home. Cricket disappeared beneath Tessa's seat. Everett did not look disappointed. He adjusted the box on his knee and kept sanding. "What if he never chooses you?" Tessa asked. Everett considered the question. "Then I'll have a very nice box." She smiled. The answer remained with her after he left. 2 days later, Everett returned again. This time, Cricket carried his blue cloth fish from the examination room. The toy had been missing since morning, and Naomi had assumed it was beneath a cabinet. Cricket walked past Tessa. He stopped beside Everett's boot and dropped the fish onto the floor. Everett looked down. The puppy sat. No tail-wagging explosion followed, no instant transformation. Cricket simply waited. Everett set the wooden box aside and placed one hand flat on the floor. Cricket stepped forward and leaned his chest briefly against Everett's fingers. Tessa felt the familiar pressure rise inside her, the urge to interpret, secure, complete. She could have said, "He chose you." She could have placed meaning on the moment before either of them was ready. Instead, she remained quiet. Everett scratched lightly beneath Cricket's chin. The puppy picked up the fish and settled beside his leg. Tessa understood then that she was not being replaced. Cricket's growing trust in Everett did not reduce what she had done for him. Care was not a position only one person could occupy. She had brought the puppy through one part of his life. Someone else might carry the next. That afternoon, Merritt went to Naomi's office to sign the transfer documents for Vesper. The folder lay precisely where it had waited for weeks. Naomi placed it on the examination table between them. "You've read the care requirements?" "Yes." "Annual orthopedic review, Hearing assessment if the response changes further. Controlled wait. No prolonged work on unstable terrain. I know. This is not a test. Merritt looked at her. I didn't say it was. You answered like there was a correct score. Vesper lay near the wall on a thick mat. His silver muzzle rested between his paws. Sunlight from the window caught the pale line of fur beneath his left eye. Merritt opened the folder. The first pages documented years of service in language stripped of memory. Identification number, medical history, certifications, handler assignment. The final page was different. It listed Merritt as the adopting party. Not the handler, not the senior chief, owner. Responsible for housing, food, routine care, medical treatment, and quality of life. The words seemed modest beside everything Vesper had once been trusted to do. They were not modest responsibilities. Merritt took out his pen. The brass compass beneath his shirt pressed against his chest as he leaned forward. He remembered the empty line in the bunk room. He remembered Vesper sleeping beside Harlan without waiting for a command. He remembered telling Tessa that Naomi could arrange care while he traveled for work. That answer now sounded like something spoken by a man trying to preserve both futures without fully living in either one. Merritt signed. The pen moved easily. No ceremony followed. Naomi turned the page and added her witness signature. That's it? Merritt asked. What were you expecting? I don't know. Trumpets? At least a stamp. I can stamp something if it helps. He almost smiled. Naomi closed the folder and handed him a copy. Vesper lifted his head when Merritt crouched beside him. You're mine now, Merritt said. Naomi looked over her glasses. That wording could use work. Merritt touched the dog's shoulder. No more unit schedule, he said. No more required evaluations. Vesper yawned. It was an undignified, complete yawn that exposed every tooth. Merritt laughed quietly. The sound surprised him less than it once would have. Outside the clinic, he sat in his truck without starting the engine. The security offer remained open on his phone. He reread the travel schedule. The work was not dishonest. It was not harmful. Someone qualified would do it, and perhaps do it well. But Merritt knew why he wanted it. The offer would let him avoid the unstructured hours ahead. It would preserve the shape of a life he understood, and turn Vesper's retirement into a boarding arrangement managed by other people. He typed a brief refusal. Thank you for the offer. I am not available for the travel requirements of this position. He did not explain further. After sending it, he expected regret. What came instead was fear. It was not pleasant. It was also honest. The first meeting about a possible new program happened the following week, around Naomi's clinic table. No one called it a launch. Jory brought records from several senior dog cases that had failed in crowded shelters. Naomi brought medical cost estimates. Tessa brought a list of approved foster families who had room for short-term placements but could not support full rescue intake. Everett brought coffee in the wooden box. Merritt brought nothing except Vesper and the habit of looking for weaknesses in a plan. The idea began small. A 6-month pilot under Naomi's clinic and an established county rescue organization. No separate building, no open intake, no promises to accept every case. Maximum 5 dogs at one time, priority for senior dogs, retired working dogs, and animals whose behavior deteriorated in crowded facilities. Everett's heated workshop could serve as emergency overnight space, but only after inspection and never as a permanent kennel. Naomi would oversee medicine and behavioral assessment. Jory would help with transfer agreements, foster contracts, and insurance. Tessa would coordinate approved homes and transport schedules. Merritt would help families understand retired working dogs, routine changes, decompression, handling boundaries, and the difference between obedience and adjustment. What do we call it? Jory asked. Nothing dramatic, Naomi said. Operation Old Dog, Caleb suggested from the speakerphone. No, everyone replied. Tessa looked at the winter road map pinned to Naomi's wall. A bridge isn't the destination, she said. It only helps something cross safely. Jory nodded. Winterbridge. Pilot, Naomi added, so no one starts printing banners. Winterbridge Pilot. The name went on the top of a single-page proposal. Tessa had not yet declined Seattle. She asked the clinic for one more week and explained that she was considering a local pilot position with fewer hours and less security. For the first time, she did not disguise uncertainty as a finished plan. Merritt did not call Winterbridge a new career. He agreed to help evaluate the first cases and train foster families, nothing more. No one asked him for a lifetime commitment. When the meeting ended, Vesper remained asleep beneath the table. Merritt looked at the draft proposal, the small list of responsibilities, and the 5-case limit underlined twice in Tessa's handwriting. No one was trapped in a forest. No building was failing. No urgent call had forced them together. They were choosing to help before crisis made the choice for them. Merritt had spent most of his adult life entering situations after danger had already declared itself. This work asked something unfamiliar. To prepare a quiet place, to teach someone how to receive an aging dog, to notice strain before loyalty turned into suffering. He did not know whether that would be enough to build a life around. For now, it was enough to return the following morning. Vesper stood when Merritt picked up the lead. Merritt did not give a command. The old shepherd walked beside him anyway. 3 months later, winter still covered Methow Valley in white, but it no longer felt like an emergency. Snow lay deep along the fences and gathered in soft ridges beneath the pines. The hardest cold had passed. During the day, sunlight loosened small drops from the eaves. At night, the roads froze again, but now the valley understood the rhythm and prepared for it. Merritt Hale's retirement ceremony took place on a clear February morning in a modest hall near the training center. There were no television cameras, no elaborate speeches, and no attempt to turn 33 years of service into a single polished memory. Folding chairs stood in neat rows, a flag rested behind a plain wooden lectern, coffee had been poured too early and had already begun to taste like warm metal. Merritt wore his formal Navy uniform. The dark fabric fit his broad frame with the precision of something built for public endings. His brown-gray hair had been combed back, showing the silver at both temples. He had shaved closely that morning, though the deep lines around his eyes remained. Vesper lay beside his chair. The German shepherd wore no tactical harness and no patch identifying him as a working dog. His cognac leather collar rested against the honey-colored fur of his neck. Silver covered his muzzle. His right ear tilted outward, while the left tracked the sounds in the room. Several people looked at him before they looked at Merritt. Merritt did not mind. Dana Mercer stood at the lectern and read the official record without decorating it. She mentioned assignments, leadership, training responsibilities, and years of service. She did not list classified work or tell stories designed to make the room admire him. When she finished the formal portion, she closed the folder. "I was told I could add a personal statement," she said. "This was a poor decision by someone unfamiliar with me." A few people laughed. Merritt looked down at Vesper. Dana's pale eyes found him across the room. Senior Chief Hale spent most of his career believing a final assignment should prove everything that came before it, she said. It does not. The room quieted. A career does not become meaningful because its last mission is perfect. It becomes meaningful because the work was done when it was needed, and because the person doing it eventually understands when to stop. Merritt felt the old brass compass beneath his uniform shirt. The needle inside had never pointed perfectly true. He had carried it anyway. Dana stepped away from the lectern before the moment could become sentimental enough to embarrass them both. Naomi Bell sat in the back row with her coat folded across her knees. Tessa sat beside her, wearing a dark green cardigan and holding a folder of Winterbridge paperwork she had promised not to open during the ceremony. She opened it once. Naomi closed it for her. When Merritt was called forward, Vesper stood with him. No command was given, the dog simply rose. Merritt accepted the folded flag and the final documents. Hands were shaken, photographs were taken. Someone asked Vesper to look toward the camera, and Vesper looked at the exit instead. Afterward, people gathered around coffee and pastries. Former colleagues spoke about old assignments without saying enough to reveal anything. Merritt answered questions about his plans with phrases such as staying local and taking some time. Both were true. Neither explained much. Dana found him near the hallway door. "You survived," she said. "Barely." "You hated the applause." "It lacked operational value." She looked at Vesper, who was accepting a small piece of plain biscuit from Naomi. "What now?" Merritt had spent months fearing that question. Now he answered without pretending certainty. "Lunch." Dana nodded. "That's enough for one day." After the ceremony, Merritt did not return to his old apartment near the base. He drove north to the small rental house he had taken near Everett Sloane's workshop and Naomi's clinic. The house sat at the end of a plowed lane bordered by birch trees. It had 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, and a kitchen whose cabinets had been painted cream at some point in the previous century. The heating system worked. The roof did not leak. The fenced yard was level enough for Vesper's rear legs. Merritt had signed a 1-year lease. He still called it the rental. He did not call it home. Yet several details had appeared that no temporary assignment required. A thick mat lay beside the porch steps so Vesper would not slip. A ramp replaced the 2 highest stairs at the back door. The kitchen contained actual food instead of protein bars and coffee. 4 ceramic bowls sat in one cupboard, and in the dining room stood a wooden table large enough for 4 people. Merritt had purchased it from Everett. He had originally asked for something smaller. Everett had looked at the measurements, looked at Merritt, and built the larger table anyway. "You'll need the room," he had said. "For what?" Everett had shrugged. "Things take up space." The table had already been used for 2 winter bridge meetings, 1 dinner with Tessa and Naomi, and an afternoon during which Caleb Frost repaired a broken crate latch directly on its surface despite Merritt's objections. There were scratches now. Merritt had decided not to sand them out. Winter Bridge Pilot occupied no single building. That was one of the rules. Its records were kept in a locked cabinet at Naomi's clinic. Its approved foster homes were scattered across the valley. Everett's heated workshop served only as inspected overnight space when a transfer schedule failed or a dog needed quiet before moving elsewhere. The program had accepted 3 cases. The first was Atlas, a retired patrol canine whose handler had suffered a stroke. Atlas still searched every room on entry and became distressed when no one gave him work. Merritt helped the foster family replace formal command sequences with predictable household routines. The second was Mabel, a 14-year-old hound who stopped eating in crowded kennel environments. She now slept beside a wood stove in the home of a retired school librarian. The third was Ridgway, a large mixed-breed dog who had lived in 4 homes in 2 years and had learned to treat every suitcase as a warning. His current foster family had agreed not to discuss permanent adoption until he had experienced 3 months without being moved. None of the cases had produced a miraculous transformation. Atlas still woke before dawn and checked the back door. Mabel required expensive medication. Ridgway had destroyed 2 cushions and 1 section of door trim. Winterbridge documented the problems rather than hiding them beneath hopeful language. Tessa worked as the pilot's paid part-time coordinator through a small county grant. She had declined the full-time position in Seattle, though not because she believed staying in Methow Valley was morally superior. After a week of consideration, she had proposed doing remote transfer consultations for the Seattle clinic 2 days a week while coordinating Winterbridge locally. The clinic accepted. For the first time, Tessa had 2 defined roles instead of 1 limitless responsibility. She still struggled with the boundaries. One Tuesday morning, Naomi found her standing at the clinic desk with a phone pressed to her ear and her orange marker uncapped in one hand. An animal control officer from another county had called about an 11-year-old dog whose owner had entered long-term care. The dog was refusing food and reacting badly to the municipal kennel. "We can take him," Tessa said. Merritt was in the waiting room with Vesper, reviewing Atlas's adjustment notes. His head lifted. Naomi looked at Tessa over the rims of her glasses. Tessa stopped. The old answer had already formed. Yes first, logistics afterward, rest somewhere beyond both. She closed her eyes briefly. "Give me 10 minutes," she said into the phone. "I need to confirm capacity and medical requirements." She ended the call. The room remained quiet. Tessa checked the board. 5-case limit. 3 active cases. 1 emergency space reserved but temporarily unavailable because Everett's workshop was being repaired. She called the 2 approved foster homes suited to senior dogs. 1 was full. The other could accept the dog in 4 days, not immediately. Then she asked Naomi whether the clinic could safely hold the dog overnight. Naomi checked staffing before answering. "No." Tessa nodded. She called the officer back. "We cannot take him today," she said. "I can arrange transport to a partner clinic on Thursday and help locate a 2-night emergency placement, but I cannot promise intake until that is confirmed." The words cost her something. Merritt saw it in the way she gripped the marker. The officer accepted the plan. After the call, Tessa placed the marker on the desk. "I hate that." "Which part?" Naomi asked. "Not fixing it immediately." "You did not refuse to help." "It feels similar." "Feelings are poor filing systems." Tessa looked toward Merritt. He had once corrected people because silence made him responsible for whatever went wrong next. Now he returned his attention to the notes. He did not congratulate her. He did not turn the moment into a lesson. Tessa noticed that, too. "Thank you for not saying anything," she said. "I had several options." "I'm sure they were excellent." "They were improving with restraint." Vesper sighed beneath the chair. The sound suggested he had heard enough from both of them. Everett completed Cricket's adoption 2 weeks after the Winter Bridge proposal was approved. By then, the puppy had visited the workshop 9 times and spent 2 trial afternoons at Everett's house. Cricket had discovered the pile of miter sawdust, the space beneath the workbench, and the exact time Everett usually opened a container of chicken for lunch. Everett had learned that the puppy disliked being picked up without warning, woke before 6, and could remove a shoelace without moving the shoe. The official adoption took place at Naomi's clinic. Jory handled the paperwork. Tessa reviewed the feeding schedule. Everett signed each page with a red carpenter's pencil before Jory forced him to use a pen. Cricket sat beneath the table chewing the blue cloth fish. When the final form was complete, Jory asked Everett whether he wanted an adoption photograph. "No." Tessa looked surprised. Everett glanced down at the puppy. "He doesn't know paperwork happened." "That is generally true of dogs," Naomi said. "I'd rather take him home." So they did. The first night, Cricket woke Everett at 4:47 a.m. by dropping the cloth fish on his chest. The second night, he hid one of Everett's gloves beneath the kitchen table. Within a month, the old house no longer stayed silent long enough for Everett to study the absence. He did not tell anyone Cricket had saved him. When visitors used words such as healing or meant to be, Everett usually changed the subject. "He is a dog," he said once while replacing a chewed strip of baseboard. "He did not arrive with a medical license." Then he looked at Cricket asleep in the sawdust beneath the workbench. "He is also a responsibility I chose." That distinction mattered to him. It mattered to Tessa as well. Vesper's new routine was quieter. He woke with Merritt between 6 and 6:30, depending on whether snowplows passed the lane. They walked the level road behind the house. Merritt no longer measured distance against the dog's old performance. When Vesper slowed, they turned back. Twice a week, they visited Naomi's clinic. During some winter bridge assessments, Vesper rested in a designated area at a safe distance from a new dog. His presence helped Naomi observe reactions to a calm, unfamiliar male shepherd. Some dogs relaxed. Some ignored him. Atlas initially stood at attention and waited for Vesper to signal what came next. Vesper lay down and fell asleep. The response confused Atlas enough that he eventually sat. Ridgway barked at Vesper during their first meeting. Merritt ended the exposure immediately. There was no disappointment. No demand to try again that day. When Vesper grew tired, Merritt took him home. He no longer searched for evidence that the dog remained useful. He checked whether Vesper was comfortable. The change seemed small from outside. To Merritt, it required relearning the entire measure of a day. One late afternoon, snow began falling over Everett's property. The flakes were light and dry, turning slowly through the air before settling on the roof of the workshop. Cricket ran around a stack of lumber in the yard, his body still too fast for his oversized paws. He slipped, rolled onto one side, then stood and continued as though the fall had been part of the plan. Everett watched from the workshop doorway with a mug in one hand. "Graceful animal," Caleb said from inside. "He resembles the people who recommended him." Tessa and Jory sat at the work table reviewing foster agreements. Jory's burgundy glasses had slipped down her nose. Tessa had written, "No new intake without capacity check," across the top of the weekly sheet in orange marker. Naomi locked the clinic across the lane and crossed through the snow carrying a medical bag. Merritt sat on the porch steps beside Vesper. The old shepherd lay with his silver muzzle on his front paws. A dusting of snow collected along the uneven black fur of his back. His leather collar was visible beneath the thicker fur at his neck. No lead lay between them. Merritt had brought one. It hung untouched from a hook near the door. Inside his shirt, the brass compass rested against his chest. The retired canine patch was no longer in his pocket. He had placed it in a small wooden box Everett made for him, the same box Cricket had inspected during their early visits. Merritt looked across the yard. Tessa was arguing with Jory about whether a form required 2 emergency contacts or 3. Everett called Cricket away from the road, and the puppy came on the second request. Naomi told Caleb he could not diagnose an animal by looking at it through a window. No one was in danger. No one needed evacuation. No one had been discovered beneath a tree or pulled from winter ground. The afternoon did not demand courage. It only required people to remain present. Merritt rested his forearms on his knees. "Tomorrow we don't have anything," he told Vesper. The shepherd opened one amber eye. "No appointment, no assessment, no transport?" Vesper exhaled through his nose. "You could show more enthusiasm." The dog closed his eye again. Merritt looked toward the falling snow. For most of his life, an empty day had felt like a space someone had forgotten to fill, a flaw in planning, an invitation for memories to become louder. Tomorrow still contained uncertainty. He might wake too early. He might reach for a schedule that did not exist. Vesper's rear leg might be stiff. The dog might sleep through most of the afternoon. Nothing productive might happen. Merritt let the possibility remain uncorrected. He had once believed loyalty meant continuing forward, regardless of what the body, the mind, or the years demanded in return. But loyalty was not proven only by endurance. Sometimes it meant releasing a title before it became a burden. Sometimes it meant allowing another person to build a relationship you had begun. Sometimes it meant declining one more case, turning back early from a walk, or admitting that a system could not survive by consuming the person holding it together. And sometimes it meant sitting beside an old dog while snow gathered on the porch, asking nothing from him at all. Cricket raced past the steps, carrying his blue fish. Vesper did not lift his head. Merritt smiled. The valley settled into evening around them. Workshop lights, clinic windows, wood smoke, and snow. Nothing had been exposed. No enemy had been defeated. No grand building had risen from the remains of the old station. There was only a rented house, a small pilot program, 3 difficult cases, several imperfect adults, and 2 dogs learning that love did not always arrive as rescue. Merritt placed one hand against Vesper's warm shoulder. The shepherd slept on. For the first time in longer than Merritt could remember, tomorrow did not need a mission to be worth reaching. Sometimes, peace does not arrive by restoring the life we had before. It comes when we finally stop asking ourselves, or those we love, to keep carrying a role that has already grown too heavy. Merritt and Vesper remind us that an ending does not erase the meaning of what came before. By God's grace, even an ordinary day can become a new beginning when we allow ourselves to rest, receive care, and walk forward without needing to prove our worth. If this story stayed with you, share in the comments what loyalty, rest, or new beginnings mean in your life. Please subscribe for more stories of courage, healing, and quiet hope. May God give you peace in every season of change.